The term basilica has its origin in the Roman Empire dating back to the 1st century and was mainly an architectural word referring to the basic layout of a civic building. It was in 313 after the Edict of Milan that basilicas began to take on religious meaning. The Roman basilicas provided all of the architectural needs of the church and the structure was adopted. The basic layout can still be seen in many churches, cathedrals, and basilicas today. In order for a church to become a basilica, it must be recommended to the Vatican, which then considers aspects of the church such as liturgy, sacraments, size, renown, beauty, mission, and others in order to judge if the church is worthy of becoming a basilica. There are two different levels of Catholic basilicas, major and minor. All basilicas have the privilege of being able to carry the ombrellino, the red and gold umbrella that historically was used to shade the Pope, and the tintinnabulum, a bell on a pole, which would traditionally signify the approach of the Pope. Today, these represent the earthly powers of the Pope as well as the basilicas linked to the pontiff. A basilica also has the right to add the crossed papal keys to its banners, furnishings, and seal. Along with these physical privileges, basilicas also have the responsibility of celebrating the feasts of the Chair of Peter, February 22nd, the Solemnity of the Holy Apostles Peter and Paul, June 29th, and the anniversary of the Pope's election or inauguration, April 19th or 24. In 2007 a petition was sent to the Vatican to request the honor of designating the shrine as a minor basilica, and in 2009 this was granted by Pope Benedict XVI. On August 22, 2009, the Basilica of the National Shrine of Mary, Queen of the Universe was dedicated. There are only 4 major basilicas in the world, all in Rome: St. Peter's, St. John Lateran, St. Mary Major and St. Paul outside the walls. These 4 churches are particularly connected to the Pope in history and in practice and are also known as papal basilicas. All other basilicas are thus minor basilicas. The term basilica can indicate either the architectural style of a church, or its canonical status. Both senses will be treated in this article. Basilica in the architectural sense. In architecture, the term basilica signifies a kingly, and secondarily a beautiful, hall. The name indicates the eastern origin of the building, but it is in the west, above all in Rome, that the finest examples of the basilica are found. Between 184 and 121 BC there were built in the Forum at Rome the basilicas of Porcia, Fulvia, Sempronia, and Opimia. After 46 BC the great Basilica Julia of Caesar and Augustus was erected. These buildings were designed to beautify the Forum and to be of use both for market purposes and for the administration of justice. They were open to the public and were well lighted. According to Vitruvius, who in this certainly agrees with Greek authorities, the usual construction of a basilica was the following. The ground plan was a parallelogram in which the width was not greater than 1/2 of the length and not less than 1/3 of it. When there was more space in the length, porticos were built on the short sides. The middle space was separated by columns from a lower ambulatory or portico. The width of the ambulatory equaled the height of the columns and measured 1/3 of the width of the central space. Above the columns just mentioned stood others, giving entrance to the light, which were shorter and slighter, in order that, as in organic structures, a tapering effect upwards should be given, de architectura, v. I, or 2. A basilica erected by Vitruvius himself showed a decided variation from this plan. It had 2 ambulatories, one above the other. Part of the columns of the middle space was left free so that light might enter. These columns rose up to the rafters. Pilasters leaning against the columns served to carry the flat roof of the ambulatories. The length of the middle nave was double its breadth and 6 times the breadth of the ambulatory. One of the long sides of the parallelogram spread out into an apse where legal cases were tried, but it was separated by the width of the ambulatory from the space for merchants, the ancient exchange. The same writer speaks, 6, 8, or v. of half-public basilicas in the houses of distinguished statesmen which served as council chambers and for the settlement of disputes by arbitration. Vitruvius compares these, 6, v or 3, with the Egyptian halls because the latter had also covered ambulatories around a middle space supported by columns and openings for light between columns above. These are the distinctive features of a basilica, which we may venture to define as an oblong structure with columns, having an ambulatory of lower height, receiving light from above, and possessing a projecting addition designed to serve a particular purpose. The form of the basilica of the early Christian Church corresponds so exactly to the shape of the basilica of the forum or of the house that it does not seem necessary to seek another model, as for instance, the atrium or the cemetery cells. The dark, narrow temple was entirely unsuited for the holding of the Christian church services. These services, which began with the Last Supper, were often held in large rooms in the dwellings of prosperous Christians. When these facts are considered, it cannot be a matter of surprise that as early as the time of Constantine the style and name of the basilica seem to have been in common use for the Christian place of worship. Moreover, the chief deviations from the general type of the ancient basilica, such as 5 aisles, pillars, angular form of the apse, omission of the portico, etc., have been used as well in the Christian basilica, to which the original meaning of the word basilica, the hall of the king, could now again be applied. As a rule, the building at this time was divided into 3 parts by columns. The well-lighted central part rose higher than the other divisions, and there was an apse. Only, in place of the former surrounding portico, or ambulatory, there was a side aisle to the right and left. There were also basilicas with 5 and 7 aisles. The old construction of the basilica with an apse was well suited to the service of the altar. A transept extending more or less towards both sides was often placed between the nave and the apse, both to serve practical needs and on account of its symbolism. The roofing of the transept together with the apse and portico produced variety in the exterior of the basilica. Vaulting, in the west, was used only at times in the side aisles. Nothing beyond a flat roof was ventured upon for the very broad middle nave, and often, at the beginning, the rafters of the roof were left uncovered. It was only after the 5th century that round or square side towers came into use. These towers were first incorporated in the main building in Syria. The early Christian basilica showed a high, yet light construction, and was roomy and well lighted. The arcades with slender columns which led up to the altar were a particularly beautiful feature. The round form of the arches, of the window heads, and the ground plan of the basilica were the first indications of the Romanesque style. The idea of a room in which the King of Kings gave audience naturally led to rich ornamentation. The back wall of the apse and the Arch of Triumph, which opened into the transept, were decorated with mosaics. The altar stood in, or before, the apse under a decorated baldacchino, ciborium. The walls were often adorned with pictures, and the floor was made of mosaic. Much use was made in the rich churches of beautiful woven stuffs and of fine goldsmith work. If the employment of these symbols had a tendency to inspire pride, other observances produced humility of mind, as, for example, the symbolic washing at the fountain. Basilica in the canonical sense. Basilica, as a term used by canon lawyers and liturgists, is a title assigned by formal concession or immemorial custom to certain more important churches, in virtue of which they enjoy privileges of an honorific character which are not always very clearly defined. Basilicas in this sense are divided into 2 classes, the greater or patriarchal, and the lesser, basilicas. Major basilicas. To the former class belong primarily those 4 great churches of Rome, St. Peter's, St. John Lateran, St. Mary Major, and St. Paul without the walls, which among other distinctions have a special holy door and to which a visit is always prescribed as one of the conditions for gaining the Roman Jubilee. They are also called patriarchal basilicas, seemingly as representative of the great ecclesiastical provinces of the world, thus symbolically united in the heart of Christendom. St. John Lateran is the cathedral of the Pope, the Patriarch of the West. St. Peter's is assigned to the Patriarch of Constantinople. St. Paul's to the Patriarch of Alexandria. St. Mary Major to the Patriarch of Antioch. St. Lawrence outside the walls is also reckoned as a greater basilica because it is specially attributed to the Patriarch of Jerusalem. Moreover, a few other churches, notably that of Saint Francis at Assisi and that of the Porciacola, have also received the privilege of ranking as patriarchal basilicas. As such they possess a papal throne and an altar at which none may say Mass except by the Pope's permission. Minor basilicas. The lesser basilicas are much more numerous, including 9 or 10 different churches in Rome, and a number of others, such as the Basilica of the Grotto at Lourdes, the votive Church of the Sacred Heart at Montmartre, the Church of Marienthal in Alsace, etc. There has been a pronounced tendency of late years to add to their number. Thus the Acta Apostolici Sedis for 1909 contains 6, and the Acta for 1911 8, such concessions. In the brief of erection the Pope declares, "We, by our apostolic authority, erect, such and such a church, to the dignity of a lesser basilica and bestow upon it all the privileges which belong to the lesser basilicas of this our own cherished city. These privileges, besides conferring a certain precedence before other churches, not, however, before the cathedral of any locality, include the right of the canopeum, the bell, and the cappa magna. The canopeum is a sort of umbrella, also called papilio, synicchio, etc., which together with the bell is carried processionally at the head of the clergy on state occasions. The cappa magna is worn by the canons or members of the collegiate chapter, if seculars, when assisting at office. The form of the canopeum, which is of red and yellow silk, is well shown in the arms of the Cardinal Camerlengo, see volume 7, p. 242, colored plate, over the cross keys. Thank you for watching this video.